You finished a project that took 3 months of your life. Late nights, skipped weekends, real sacrifice. And the moment your boss said, "Great work," before you even let yourself feel it, you opened your mouth and said, "Oh, it was really a team effort. I got lucky with the timing. Honestly, the original idea wasn't even mine. You just won." And you immediately dismantled the win. Or this one. Someone you respect asked why you made a certain career decision. A decision you thought about deeply. A decision that cost you something. A decision you believed in. And you spent 11 minutes constructing a verbal legal brief to justify it. By the end, you were so tangled in your own explanation that you'd almost talked yourself out of the very thing you chose. Here's the one that cuts deepest, though. You said no to something, a favor, an invitation, a demand on your time, something you had every right to decline. And then you spent the next 2 hours running through every possible way the other person might be interpreting your no, rewriting the text, adding context, softening the edges until your no barely resembled a no anymore. Sound familiar? Here's what nobody is talking about. That pattern that reflex to justify, minimize, over-clarify, and pre-defend is not a communication habit. It is not a personality quirk. It is not thoughtfulness or emotional intelligence dressed up in extra words. It is costing you something enormous. It is costing you your power, your credibility, your confidence, and the quiet, solid sense of self that every human being deserves to walk through life with. Today, that changes. Over the next 10 lessons, we are going to go deep. Not surface-level motivation, not believe in yourself energy. Real, uncomfortable, precise insight into why you explain your life away and exactly how to stop. These lessons are grounded in Stoic philosophy, the same school of thought that helped a former slave named Epictetus become one of the most quoted thinkers in history, that guided Marcus Aurelius through the weight of leading an empire, that gave Seneca the clarity to write words that still crack people open 2,000 years later. These weren't armchair philosophers. These were people under real pressure, poverty, power, persecution, who figured out something most people spend their whole lives missing. Your inner world is yours. Protect it like it matters, because it does. Before we get into lesson 1, and trust me, lesson 1 is the one that restructures how you see every relationship you have. Understand this about what you're about to hear. This is not about becoming cold, not about becoming arrogant or dismissive or closed off. The goal here is not to speak less because you care less. The goal is to speak from a different place entirely. Right now, most of your explanations come from fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear that if you don't build a good enough case, people won't approve of you, and without that approval, something essential feels at risk. By the end of this, you're going to understand exactly where that fear came from. You're going to see how it operates in your daily life with uncomfortable precision. And you're going to have real tools, not theory, real tools to start living and communicating from a completely different foundation. One built on clarity, on self-possession, on the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need an audience to feel real. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Not power over opinions, not power over how others receive you, power over your own mind, your own inner world. That is the only territory that was ever yours to govern. And it's time to take it back. Stay with me. Lesson 1 is about to reframe everything. Lesson 1. You never signed that contract. Here is a question nobody ever asks you directly, but your behavior answers it every single day. When did you agree to this? When did you sit down and decide that every choice you make in your life needs to be understood, approved, or validated by the people around you before it counts as real? When did you sign the invisible contract that says your decisions don't belong fully to you until someone else has reviewed them and stamped them acceptable. You didn't. Nobody did. But most people are living as though they did, operating under terms they never agreed to, carrying obligations that were never actually placed on them, running their inner life like a courtroom where every decision has to be argued before a jury that was never elected. Think about how this shows up in a single ordinary day. You choose what to order at a restaurant and then feel the need to explain your choice to whoever is sitting across from you. You decide to go to bed early on a Friday and immediately construct a reason that sounds acceptable before anyone even asks. You change your mind about something, a plan, a preference, a direction, and before you've even finished processing the change yourself, you're already rehearsing how to present it to others in a way that won't invite pushback. The decision is yours, the life is yours, but the permission seeking is constant. Where does this come from? The Stoics were obsessed with this question, not in an abstract philosophical way, but in a practical, almost clinical way. They wanted to understand exactly how the mind gets colonized by external opinion, because they knew that until you understood the mechanism, you couldn't dismantle it. Here is what they found, and what modern psychology has since confirmed. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, most people absorb a belief that their choices require external validation to be legitimate. That internal certainty alone is not enough. That the feeling of knowing what you want, what you need, what is right for you, that feeling needs to be confirmed by someone outside of you before you can fully trust it. And that belief didn't come from nowhere. Maybe you grew up in a home where your judgment was regularly second-guessed, where you made a decision and the response wasn't curiosity or support, it was interrogation. Maybe you learned early that the safest way to avoid criticism was to get ahead of it. Explain first, justify preemptively, build the case before anyone asks for one. Maybe you were in a relationship, romantic, professional, familial, where your perspective was routinely treated as naive or uninformed, where the message, spoken or not, was clear. Your instincts can't be trusted, so check with someone who knows better. And over time, that external checking became internal. You started doing it to yourself. You started cross-examining your own decisions before anyone else had the chance, which means by the time you present a choice to the world, you've already put it through a filter of imagined disapproval. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." What is in your power? Your choices, your values, your direction. What is not in your power? Whether someone else approves of those choices, whether they understand them, whether they agree. The moment you start crafting explanations designed to manufacture agreement, you have left the territory you were meant to govern and wandered into territory that was never yours to control. Here is what reclaiming that territory actually looks like in practice. It does not look like arrogance. It does not look like shutting people out or refusing to communicate. It looks like making a decision and allowing it to stand on its own. It looks like trusting that your choices do not need external scaffolding to hold their weight. It looks like understanding deeply, not just intellectually, that you are the only person who has to live inside your life. Every consequence of every decision you make lands on you, not on the people you explained yourself to, not on the ones who approved or disapproved, on you, which means the authority over those decisions belongs to exactly one person, and that person does not owe anyone a justification. Lesson 2. The real reason you can't stop justifying yourself. Before we go any further, there is something you need to hear, and it is possibly the most important thing in this entire video. The reason you over-explain is not because you talk too much. It is not because you lack confidence in some surface-level way that a few affirmations can fix. It is not a communication flaw you can patch with a technique. It is a response, a learned, deeply wired, survival-level response. And until you understand it at that level, not as a bad habit, but as a protection mechanism, your nervous system built to keep you safe, changing it will feel like fighting yourself. Because, in a very real sense, that is exactly what you will be doing. Here is what most self-development content skips entirely. Over-explaining, in the majority of cases, is what psychologists call a fawn response. When most people hear about stress responses, they think of fight or flight. But there is a third one, and a fourth, that rarely gets discussed: freeze and fawn. Fawning is what happens when your nervous system decides that the safest way to survive a threatening situation is to appease, accommodate, and make yourself acceptable to the source of the threat. In childhood environments, where love felt conditional, where approval was available but could be withdrawn, fawning became the adaptive strategy. Keep them happy. Explain yourself clearly enough. Make sure they understand. If they understand, they won't reject you. If they don't reject you, you are safe. That was smart. As a child, in that environment, that response protected you. The problem is that your nervous system never got the update. It is still running that same program in your workplace, in your relationships, in conversations with strangers, long after the original threat disappeared. So when someone questions your decision today, your system does not register it as a minor social friction. It registers it as danger, and it deploys the same response it always has. Explain, justify, make them understand, be safe. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That is precisely what is happening when you over-explain. You are responding not to what is actually happening in the room, a person asking a question, but to what your nervous system imagines could happen if they don't approve. The rejection, the withdrawal, the judgment. The explanation is not for them. It is for the version of you that is still bracing for a danger that no longer exists. Now, here is where this gets important. Understanding this is not an excuse to stay stuck. It is the opposite. Because when you see the mechanism clearly, when you recognize in real time that the urge to over-explain is your nervous system sounding an alarm that does not match the actual situation, you gain something critical. Pause. A gap between the trigger and the response. And in that gap, choice becomes possible. This is exactly what Stoic practice is built around. Marcus Aurelius did not simply decide to be disciplined and then become disciplined. He trained himself daily, deliberately, to examine the space between what happened and how he responded, to ask, is this response appropriate to what is actually in front of me, or is it a reflex? That question is the beginning of everything. Lesson 3. The counterintuitive truth about being believed. Here is something that will change the way you communicate permanently once you see it. The more you explain, the less convincing you become. Not because people are contrarian, not because brevity is inherently impressive, but because of a deeply wired psychological response that every human being has, including you, called the over-justification effect. When someone gives you an excessive number of reasons for something, your brain does not interpret that as thoroughness. It interprets it as compensation. It reads the volume of justification as evidence that the thing being justified might not stand on its own. Think about the last time someone tried hard to convince you of something. A salesperson, a colleague, pushing an idea, someone defending a decision they clearly felt uncertain about. The more reasons they gave, the more your internal radar activated. Not because the reasons were bad, but because the desperation behind them was visible. Now think about the people in your life whose word carries the most weight. They do not pile on reasons, they state things. They let their certainty do the work. When they say something is good, you believe them precisely because they do not seem to need you to. That is not charisma. That is not some rare personality trait. That is what communication looks like when it comes from a settled, grounded place rather than from anxiety. Epictetus said, It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Apply that here differently. It is impossible to appear certain about something you are actively trying to convince others of. The act of over-explaining broadcasts uncertainty even when you feel none, even when your decision is completely sound. Economy of language is not coldness. It is confidence made audible. And it starts the moment you trust that your words said once, said clearly, are enough. Lesson 4. The relationships that are quietly draining you. Think about the last time you felt that familiar pull, that almost physical compulsion to explain yourself, and ask one honest question. Who were you explaining yourself to? Not a stranger, not a co-worker you barely know. In most cases, it was someone close, someone who is supposed to know you, someone whose relationship with you is built on years of shared history, on genuine care, on the assumption of goodwill. And yet with that person you over-explain more than with almost anyone else. That is not an accident, and it is not a flaw in you. It is information. Here is what that pattern is actually telling you about the relationships where it shows up most consistently. Genuine trust, the kind that exists in truly secure relationships, does not demand constant justification. Think about the person in your life you feel most completely at ease with, the one you could call in a moment of crisis without rehearsing what you're going to say first. When you make a decision and tell that person about it, what is your default expectation of their response? Acceptance, curiosity at most, not interrogation. Now think about the relationships where you consistently over-explain, where you preload your reasoning before anyone has even questioned you, where you find yourself monitoring your words, calibrating your tone, anticipating the reaction before it comes. What is your default expectation there? If you are honest, and this requires real honesty, that default expectation is often judgment, questioning, a subtle or not so subtle message that your reasoning needs to clear a bar before it will be accepted. That gap between the relationship that feels safe and the one that doesn't, that is a trust deficit. And it is worth naming clearly instead of explaining around. Seneca wrote, "One of the most beautiful qualities of true friendship is to understand and to be understood." Notice what he did not say. He did not say true friendship is to justify and be justified, to explain and be approved, to perform acceptability and receive conditional acceptance in return. Understanding, mutual, clean. When that quality is absent, when you have to work hard to be understood by someone who should already have a foundation of goodwill toward you, the relationship is asking something of you that relationships are not designed to ask. Now, this is not a call to cut people off. Relationships are complex. People carry their own wounds, their own patterns, their own ways of engaging that have nothing to do with you personally. Someone can love you genuinely and still make you feel unsafe to be fully yourself. Both things can be true at the same time, but you need to know which relationships are which. Because the relationships where you over-explain most are the relationships that are shaping your internal voice most powerfully. The people you brace yourself around over time, their anticipated reactions become the voice inside your head. You start cross-examining your own decisions in their tone. You start applying their standards to choices they will never even know you made. That is how a trust deficit in one relationship quietly colonizes your entire inner world. Lesson 5. What your silence is actually communicating. Most people experience silence as a void, an absence, something uncomfortable that needs to be filled as quickly as possible before anyone notices it existed. And that discomfort, that almost panicked rush to fill every quiet moment with words, is one of the primary engines of over-explanation. Someone asks you a challenging question, and before the sound of their last word has fully landed, you are already talking. Not because you have processed the question, not because you have chosen your response deliberately, but because silence felt dangerous, and words felt like safety. Here is what you are not seeing when that happens. Silence is not neutral. It is not simply the absence of communication. Silence is itself a signal, and depending on how you carry it, it is one of the most powerful signals available to you in any conversation. When you pause, before responding genuinely, intentionally, without visible discomfort, you communicate several things simultaneously. You communicate that you are not rattled, that the question, however pointed, does not threaten your equilibrium, that you are choosing your words rather than being chased by them. That pause, those few seconds of quiet before you speak, tells the other person something that no amount of explanation ever could. It tells them you are grounded. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth, by which no one was ever truly harmed." That is intellectual security. The kind of security that allows you to sit in silence after a difficult question without scrambling to fill it, because your sense of self is not dependent on how quickly you can demonstrate your reasoning. The truly grounded person can let a question hang in the air, can take a breath, can choose. Here is the practice that changes everything faster than almost anything else in this video. Before you respond to any high-stakes question, a challenge from a partner, a pointed question in a meeting, a provocative comment from someone testing your composure, pause for exactly 3 seconds. Not a fidgety, uncomfortable pause, a still one. Make eye contact, take one breath, then speak. 3 seconds sounds insignificant. It is not. In those 3 seconds, your brain shifts from reactive mode to deliberate mode. Your nervous system registers that there is no emergency. Your words, when they come from choice rather than from alarm. And here is what happens to your explanation when it comes from that place. It gets shorter, cleaner, more precise. Because when you are not panicking, you do not need 17 sentences to say what 3 will hold. You do not need qualifiers and hedges and follow-up clarifications. You say the thing, you let it land, you stop. That is not coldness, that is command. And it is available to you in every single conversation, starting with the next one. Lesson 6. Stop defending. Here is what actually works instead. There is a moment most people know intimately. Someone says something critical. Maybe it is directed at a decision you made. Maybe it is a challenge to your character. Maybe it is somewhere in the gray area, not quite an accusation, but not quite neutral either. And in the fraction of a second that follows, before you have even consciously registered what was said, something activates. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts accelerate. You are suddenly, urgently, gathering evidence, context, counterpoints, timeline, witnesses. If you could find them building a defense case at a speed your conscious mind can barely keep up with. By the time the other person finishes speaking, you are not listening anymore. You are waiting, loaded, ready to explain why they are wrong, or why you were justified, or why the full picture is more complicated than what they just said. And the moment you open your mouth, the moment the defense begins, you have already lost something important. Here is what defensive reactivity actually communicates, regardless of what your words say. It communicates that the criticism landed, that it found something, that your sense of self is fragile enough in this area that an outside challenge required immediate emergency response. You may be entirely in the right. Your reasoning may be completely sound, but the speed and intensity of your defense signals vulnerability, and people read that signal whether they are conscious of it or not. This is what makes defensive over-explanation so counterproductive. You deploy it to protect yourself, and it ends up exposing exactly what you were trying to protect. So what do you do instead? The Stoics had a practice that modern conflict psychology has since arrived at independently through entirely different methods. It is simple to describe and genuinely difficult to execute, not because it is complicated, but because it runs directly against every instinct your nervous system has in that moment. You absorb. When criticism comes, when someone challenges you, questions you, accuses you, instead of immediately defending, you receive it. You let it arrive. You do not rush to process whether it is true or false, fair or unfair. You simply acknowledge that something has been said. You say, "That's worth thinking about. Tell me more about what you mean." Or simply, "I hear you." Or, and this one is the most powerful and the most difficult, nothing at all. A nod, steady eye contact, stillness. Epictetus wrote, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." Choosing that deliberate selection of response over reaction is the entire practice. Not suppression, not indifference. A genuine, conscious decision to respond from your values rather than from your alarm system. Here is what absorbing instead of defending actually produces in a conflict. First, it disrupts the pattern completely. Every conflict has a rhythm, a call and response dynamic that both people fall into almost automatically. When you break that rhythm by not defending, the entire energy of the exchange shifts. The other person was braced for resistance. When they do not get it, the force behind their challenge has nowhere to land. The intensity deflates. Second, and this is the part most people miss absorbing, creates the space to actually evaluate whether the criticism has merit. Because here is an uncomfortable truth about defensive reactivity. It prevents you from benefiting from legitimate feedback. Some of the most valuable information you will ever receive about yourself comes wrapped in criticism. But if your nervous system treats every challenge as an attack and deploys immediate defense, that information never gets through. You spend all your energy fighting the message and none examining it. The Stoic framework for criticism is not defense and it is not collapse. It is perspective. The steady, grounded awareness that your worth is not located in other people's assessments of you, which means their criticism carries no existential weight. You can consider it with genuine openness, take what is accurate, release what is not, without the whole thing becoming a battle for your identity. Lesson 7. The framework that changes how you speak permanently. Everything covered so far has been about understanding the problem at its root, the why behind the pattern, the mechanism underneath the habit. Now, here is the practical architecture, a simple, immediately applicable framework that restructures how you communicate in any high-stakes situation. 3 parts. Easy to remember, genuinely transformative when used consistently. Assert, context, end. Most over-explanation happens because people lead with context, all the background, all the reasoning, all the qualifications, and by the time they get to the actual point, both they and the person listening have lost the thread. Or they assert something, get anxious about how it landed, and then pile context on top of context until the original assertion is buried under its own justification. This framework reverses that entirely. Assert first. State your decision, your answer, your position clearly, directly, at the beginning, not after 3 sentences of setup, not softened with qualifiers. First. Instead of, "So, I've been thinking about this for a while, and after weighing a lot of different factors, I think I might want to consider possibly not taking on that project right now." Say, "I'm not taking on that project." Start there, full stop. Context second, but only if it genuinely serves the conversation. 1 reason, 1 sentence, maybe 2, not a paragraph, not a list, not a preemptive defense of every possible objection. "I'm not taking on that project. My bandwidth is committed through the end of the quarter." Done. End. Close the explanation. Do not add qualifiers. Do not trail off into another round of justification. Do not apologize for the position you just stated. Silence. That is the end. Seneca wrote, "Hang on to your gut feelings. They know what they're talking about. That is exactly what this framework protects. Your gut, your original, unfiltered knowing before anxiety, layers other people's potential reactions on top of it. Every additional sentence you add beyond the framework is usually not more information. It is fear wearing the costume of thoroughness. Use this framework consistently, and something deeper shifts over time. Because the act of asserting first, of putting your decision at the front before any explanation, trains your brain to lead from confidence rather than from apprehension. And when you know you will have to assert clearly, you start making decisions you actually believe in, ones you can state without immediately wanting to take back. That internal shift from fear-based deciding to value-based deciding is where real power lives. Lesson 8. There is a difference between explaining and communicating. Something needs to be said directly before we go further, because if it is not said, everything in this video can be misread in a way that actually causes harm. This is not an argument for silence as a lifestyle. It is not a case for becoming someone who withholds, stonewalls, or hides behind composed detachment as a way of avoiding genuine connection. It is not permission to be dismissive to the people who matter to you or to confuse emotional unavailability with strength. The goal was never less communication. The goal is better communication, communication that comes from a completely different internal place than where most people are currently operating from. Here is the distinction that changes everything. There are two kinds of explanation. They can look almost identical from the outside, same words, similar length, comparable detail, but they are fundamentally different in origin, in effect, and in what they do to you over time. The first kind comes from security, from genuine care for the person you are speaking with, from a real desire to be understood because understanding serves the relationship. This kind of explanation is an act of connection. It deepens trust. It creates intimacy. It is one of the most valuable things one human being can offer another. The second kind comes from fear, from the need to manage how you are being perceived, from anxiety about judgment, about disapproval, about the possibility that if you do not explain yourself thoroughly enough, something essential will be taken from you. This kind of explanation is not connection, it is performance. And however much it looks like openness, it is actually a form of self-protection dressed in the language of sharing. The work, the real work, is learning to tell the difference, not in theory, in the moment, in real time, when the urge rises. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." The Stoics were not cold people. They were not emotionally unavailable or relationally distant. Marcus Aurelius wrote with extraordinary tenderness about the people he loved. Seneca's letters to Lucilius are among the most intimate documents in the history of philosophy. Epictetus spoke about human connection with a warmth that contradicts every caricature of Stoic detachment. What they refused to do with great discipline and great intention was let anxiety drive their speech. They communicated from virtue, from genuine care, from real accountability when accountability was owed, from authentic curiosity when curiosity was present, not from the need to manage other people's perceptions of them. So here is the filter. A single question you can apply in any moment where you are wondering whether to explain yourself more. Is this explanation serving them, serving the relationship, serving genuine understanding, or is it serving my need to feel safe from judgment? If the answer is the first, communicate fully, with warmth, with detail, with complete openness. Those are the moments where rich explanation is not weakness. It is exactly what the situation requires. When your decision directly affects someone who has a genuine stake in the outcome, they deserve a clear and honest account. Not because you owe them approval, but because they are genuinely impacted, and real care looks like transparency in those moments. When you have made a mistake in a professional context, A direct and unhedged explanation of what happened and what you are doing to address it is not over-explanation, it is integrity. When vulnerability in a close relationship creates deeper connection, when sharing your reasoning, your doubts, your internal process brings you and someone you love closer together, that is intimacy. Not weakness, not over-explanation, intimacy. And when you have genuinely hurt someone, and clarity is what the repair requires, a real explanation followed by real accountability is not a performance of acceptability, it is character. The distinction is never about word count, it is never about length or detail, or how much you share. It is always about origin. Where is this coming from? Genuine connection or managed perception? Real care or concealed fear? Lesson 9. Your identity does not belong to anyone else's opinion of it. There is a question underneath everything we have covered today, underneath all 10 lessons, underneath the framework, underneath the psychology and the philosophy. And it is this: who are you when nobody is watching? Not who you perform, not who you explain, not the version of you that exists in other people's assessments, shaped by their reactions, filtered through their approval, edited to fit their comfort. Who are you before all of that? There is a concept in social psychology called the looking glass self. The idea is straightforward and deeply unsettling when you sit with it honestly. Much of what most people experience as their identity, their sense of who they are, what they are worth, what they are capable of, is not actually self-generated. It is a reflection, a mirror image of how they believe others perceive them. We look at ourselves. Then we look at ourselves through the imagined eyes of other people. And over time, for many people, the reflection becomes more real than the reality, more authoritative, more trusted. And what that does, gradually, quietly, over years, is this. Every time you over-explain, you are making a small unconscious bet. You are betting that the version of you that exists in someone else's understanding is more important than the version of you that exists in your own. You are filing a piece of your actual self away, unexpressed, unjustified to no one, and presenting instead the version that has been pre-approved for external consumption. Do that enough times, across enough decisions, across enough years, and one day you look inward for a clear sense of what you actually want, what you actually think, who you actually are, and the signal is weak, buried, hard to locate under all the noise of imagined voices and anticipated reactions. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Mastery of self does not begin with discipline or productivity or any external restructuring of your habits. It begins with reclaiming the territory of your own identity from the opinions that have been quietly colonizing it. And it begins with the smallest decisions. Order what you actually want without explaining your choice to the table. Leave when you genuinely want to leave without constructing a 10-minute exit narrative. Change your mind without issuing a formal retraction and justification. Say no clean, simple, complete without a story attached to it. These small moments are not small. Each one is a vote cast in favor of the self that exists before the performance begins. And those votes accumulate. Over days and weeks, they rebuild something that over-explanation quietly dismantled, a genuine, grounded, unshakable trust in your own inner knowing. That trust, once rebuilt, changes everything. Not because the world changes, not because people stop having opinions or stop questioning your choices, but because their questions stop feeling like verdicts, their opinions stop feeling like evidence about your worth. You become, in the most precise sense of the word, yourself. And that self needs no external verification to feel completely, solidly real. Lesson 10. The life waiting on the other side of this. Everything we have covered in this video has been moving toward a single point. Not a technique, not a mindset shift you adopt for a week, and then quietly abandon when life gets complicated. A genuine, lasting transformation in the way you occupy your own existence. And that transformation does not begin somewhere in the future, when conditions are better, when you have more confidence, when the people around you become easier to deal with, when the circumstances of your life rearrange themselves into something more forgiving. It begins in the next decision you make. So let's talk about what actually becomes possible concretely, specifically when you stop spending your energy on explanation and start redirecting it toward living. The first thing that opens up is creative output at a level most people never reach. This connection gets overlooked almost universally in conversations about creativity. People talk about talent, inspiration, discipline, environment. Almost nobody talks about how much creative energy gets consumed by approval seeking. Every time you filter an idea before it is fully formed, because you are already anticipating the criticism. Every time you do not start something, because you are preloading the explanation for why it might fail. Every time you water down a bold instinct into something safer and more defensible, that is creative energy that never finds expression. When explanation stops being the primary output of your mental energy, something extraordinary happens. Ideas that were previously too vulnerable to survive contact with imagined judgment start making it through. Work that is genuinely yours, unfiltered, undefended, fully inhabited, starts emerging. And that kind of work, the kind that comes from a place of authentic expression rather than calculated acceptability, is the kind that actually moves people. The second thing that transforms is the quality of your relationships. When you stop performing for the people in your life, when you stop calibrating every word for maximum approval and minimum friction, you become someone people can actually reach. Authenticity, real authenticity, not the performed kind, is one of the rarest and most magnetic qualities a person can carry. The connections that form when you are operating from genuine confidence rather than managed presentation are categorically different from the ones built on the performance of acceptability. They are deeper, more honest, more sustaining. And here is the thing about the relationships that cannot survive your authenticity, the ones that required your constant explanation and justification to remain intact. Those relationships were never actually about you. They were about the version of you willing to keep auditioning. Letting them change is not loss, it is clarity. The third transformation is in how you make decisions. When other people's potential reactions are no longer factored into every choice, when you are not preloading your defense before you have even made the decision, you can finally hear yourself. Your actual values, your genuine priorities, the quiet, persistent signal of what actually matters to you beneath all the noise of anticipated judgment. Decisions made from that place of authentic clarity tend to be remarkably good ones, not because you become infallible, but because they are aligned. They cost less energy to maintain. They require no ongoing explanation because they came from a place in you that does not need defending. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it? Replace anger with over-explanation, and that truth holds with equal precision. How much more grievous are the consequences of a lifetime of over-explaining than the brief discomfort of simply allowing someone to not fully understand you? The lost confidence, the eroded sense of self, the creative energy that never found expression, the decisions made for the wrong reasons, the relationships built on performance rather than presence, the years spent governing other people's perceptions instead of your own life. All of that, every single consequence, is heavier than the momentary discomfort of an unexplained decision." The Stoics understood something that took most people their entire lives to arrive at: that the approval of others was never the thing that made a life well lived. That external validation was not a foundation, it was sand. That the only ground solid enough to build on was internal, your values, your judgment, your willingness to stand behind your choices without requiring anyone else to ratify them. Epictetus lived that truth in chains and became a free man. Marcus Aurelius carried it under the weight of an empire and found peace. Seneca wrote it from the edge of his own mortality and left it for us 2,000 years later. And now it is yours, not as philosophy, not as inspiration you feel for 48 hours and then lose, as a daily practice, a commitment made in small moments, in the next conversation where the urge to over-explain rises and you choose clarity instead, in the next decision you make and allow to stand without scaffolding, in the next criticism you receive and absorb without collapsing or defending. That is where the philosophy becomes a life. There is a version of your existence where you wake up already knowing you are enough, where your choices come from peace rather than panic, where other people's opinions are interesting but not load-bearing, where you move through the world with the quiet, unshakable dignity of someone who has stopped needing external permission to feel real. That version is not distant. It is not conditional on your circumstances improving or the people around you becoming easier or the world becoming more fair. It is available right now. In the next moment, you choose your own clarity over someone else's comfort. Stop explaining. Start living. If this video reached something in you, if something shifted even slightly, share it with one person who needs to hear it. Not because a number on a screen matters, but because the right idea at the right moment can genuinely change the direction of someone's life. Hit subscribe if you want to go this deep every single week. Every video on this channel is built to give you something real, not motivation that evaporates, but perspective that stays. And drop a comment right now telling me which lesson landed hardest for you. I read every single one, and your answer shapes exactly what comes next. Now go make a decision, a real one, an honest one, and do not explain it to anyone.